Assalamualaikum and a very good afternoon. Welcome back to all of you. And as what Roshan mentioned just now, it's going to be a very interesting topic. We were actually trying to get the people to the front by having a TikTok dance. So at least you're more, all of you are very much interested to be in front of the stage. But anyway, we have a very interesting panelists here. They are the experts in their areas, from smart cities, smart nations, and also smart industries. There are various topics which we like to cover for today. Maybe for the first round, I will just tell them about, give you about the whole perspective about smart cities, smart nation, and smart industry itself. And we have seen, I think early in the morning, we have talked about many times about before the pandemic happened, during the pandemic, and the post-pandemic. And we are at the stage of the endemic stage. And we have seen, we have been talking about this digital transformation, and what happened is that not only for one particular vertical of industry, but a lot of industries have been impacted. We love to hear that, when we talk about a wake-up call, even before the pandemic happened, a lot of sessions that we have today, something like this, it's very difficult to get people to disrupt themselves or transform themselves, because they listen, but it's not as exciting than what they want. But when pandemic happened, this is the biggest wake-up call for all this thing to happen. So it's very interesting to see now that a lot of organizations are now having this digital transformation happen. But I would like also to say that during the last 2 years, we also seen a big gap. Suddenly we found that there is a gap which we didn't realize. And when we talk about this journey, so we have seen, especially in the connectivity, the infrastructure part, where a lot of things happen is that there is not enough coverage, not enough speed. And we heard news that people want to get internet access, even they have to go and climb the trees to get that internet access. Why does it happen? Only then we realized, because we thought that there is 100% of coverage, good broadband, but yet it doesn't happen that way. So we also found out that in the area like smart industries, in Malaysia we call it industry forward. So it is catered mainly for the manufacturing sector. But personally, I feel that industrial revolution doesn't only occur in the manufacturing sector. It's also occur in different sectors, regardless where you are. So for a start, I would just like to share with you maybe a simple analogy about what the IR 1.0 and 4.0 it is, okay? Because some people say that, let's go to IR 4.0, let's build our cities 4.0, but what exactly it is? For me, when we talk about, if we are living in the IR 1.0, it is all about manual and physical things, I'm one of the culprits to use manual and physical things, which paper, but if you're online, like what we have with our panels here, we actually at the IR 3.0 thing. We are using this kind of technology online. But 2.0 means that you are using machines which is electrically powered. But the 4.0 is where we really transform it, using technologies like AR, VR, IoT, virtual, blockchain, robotics, and all of this. So these are the new technologies of the IR 4.0. But then we realized that before even we move towards that stage, we have to ask ourselves where we are. We did a survey to the whole industry a couple of years back, the assessment of 4.0, where we are. They said we are IR 2.7. So you have to ask yourself, your industry, which industrial revolution you are. The reason why I say this is because I give another example. During the pandemic time, people asked us to do some claim. The government asked you to do a claim, but they sent us a form, a PDF form, then send through the email. I have to print out the form, sign it manually, scan it back, send it to the email, and then finally they will ask us, hey, please send using the post office. physical paper. So what exactly is this? Is it really the fourth industrial revolution? Is this what totally digital is? So if you want to have that conversion of totally 100% total digital, then you must have a digital signature. Simple as that. So that's why I say it is mainly like, you know, people say that we are not really at the 4.0 part. Of course, members here are very advanced, the organizations here. We have talked yesterday about metaverse. Metaverse cities. Cities which you can imagine of, you can be in the cities which is totally a digital twin. So these are some of the areas of which is very interesting. I have my panel here. We give them the initial thoughts. Yeah, we have Mark, we have Prof, we have also Dr. Wanda to talk about, and we have Karthik to talk about these areas. So let's hear their thoughts, initial thoughts about the whole smart cities, what happened before that, during the pandemic, and after the pandemic, what's happened, and then let's see how we can move forward. We know that there's a lot of issues that we have been talking about, but we like to hear how can we resolve all of these issues. So with that, I will start with May first to give her thoughts on this. Thank you.
Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Mazlan. Hi. We have a very difficult task this afternoon. We have to keep everybody awake and focused. So, I'm May, Seok May. I'm from an organization, a non-government, non-profit organization called United Cities. So today, I will be talking about smart technologies in smart cities towards smart nation. Does that make sense? Yes? No? Please ask us anything. Ask us anything, can? And we try to answer, yeah? And we will like to keep this as interactive as possible. Please, you know, let it be a two-way communication so that I also don't fall asleep. So, United Cities, who are we? We are a non-profit, non-governmental organization that enables cities to work towards United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and net zero prosperity. A mouthful, eh? So basically, how do we do this? We use technologies as a base. Like what Mazlan mentioned earlier, we use base technologies like digital twins to enable the city to make better decisions and to know where they are in terms of a global city dashboard or a city benchmark. So we are partners to 16 UN organizations, and we implement United for Smart Sustainable Cities programs and initiatives. So we look at this from 3 dimensions, which is environmental, which is very important. Everyone is talking about climate change right now. We look at this from an economic standpoint, and we also look at this from a social standpoint. And from these 3 dimensions, we have 26 categories. And these 26 categories are where the cities will benchmark themselves to see where they are when it comes to areas, for example, like housing. Are we providing adequate housing? Are we looking at mobility, sufficient mobility? Are we looking at preserving our heritage? We are preserving the heritage in Majestic Hotel here, but from an energy perspective, it is very cold and we're using a lot more energy than what we're supposed to. Correct not? Yes, no? Raise of hands. Anybody here cold? Yes. So that is energy. And then from an economic standpoint as well, we look at energy, we look at water, we look at how to reduce waste. So these are some of the key performance indicators that we look at from a city perspective, and how can industries in your own organization help to work towards the better good. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, May. I think if you look, that is the overall about smart cities. But under smart cities, there's a lot of other vertical applications from, you know, to cater for transportation, the government, the community themselves, and also about healthcare. So I think with that, I would like to invite Karthik. He is the specialist in the healthcare industry. Maybe you'd like to, you know, highlight a little bit more about that.
Thank you, Dr. Mazlan. Before I say anything, I'm extremely happy for the third year that I'm not faxing handshakes. I'm actually in an in-person conference. So thank you, KSI, a huge thank. This is really what conferences are about, meeting people and, having coffees, lunches, and, exchanging thoughts. This could have never been done if we were doing this on Zoom like what we were doing the past couple of years. So I'm really very thankful. It does restore a little bit of sense of normality to my life. Otherwise, I would have been right now like what Dr. Mazlan was saying, a coat on the top, but a shorts underneath. So this is a slightly different version of what it is today. So thank you very much. I think one of the things I do want to talk about, and before that, a quick brief introduction about what Napier Healthcare does in this space so that it gives you a background about what kind of problems that we solve, and then I'll try to relate them to smart health. We are actually in the business of providing technology that runs hospitals and nursing homes and daycare and home care and all such providers of healthcare. And we do that end to end, which means from the time the patient comes in to the time the patient leaves. Very understated, and you would not find us being visible in a hospital, but we are always at the back running the entire operations. So that just to give you a sense of what I do, so that a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about will actually be from that perspective. Yeah. So I think one of the questions that Dr. Mazlan did talk about was how governments should modernize IT infrastructure of local councils. I must say, upfront and at the outset, I am no expert to tell governments what to do. I'm just a pure ordinary citizen. So I will say that as a disclaimer before I say anything else. But one thing I'll certainly want to share with you, given over 30 years of running projects in the IT industry, what happens is a project is a failure only if you don't carry the users along with you, which means there is a very huge component of change management. And that change management requires that we carry users along with us when doing any technology or infrastructure project, especially which requires technology to be used in some form or shape, and smart nations for sure use a lot of technology. So if you keep that in mind, one example I quickly want to cite before I move on is there is this app called Amana 940. So this is something that was introduced by the municipality of Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. It basically allows a citizen to take a look at any of the municipal services they provide. And for example, if there is a water that's leaking from a tap on the street, or if there is a light that is not working, or is a pothole on the road, for example, they could just take a picture of that and send it to them, and someone will then close the loop with them when it is completed. So this brings the citizen into the stakeholdership of solving problems, reporting problems, and thereby improving the city. So there's a very simple way I thought would illustrate how you could bring a stakeholder into a solution. And this is something we must all remember when implementing any IT project. The stakeholder cannot be forgotten. So with that, I will stop whatever advice the government I must be giving, right? Moving on, one thing you will notice for also the success of the Smart Nation initiative, Smart City initiative, is people who can actually work with technology. So I have both good news and a little bit of not so good news. The good news is that today we call these people as digital natives. The millennials and the generation Z or Z, whichever way you pronounce it, right? They constitute, I think, about 38% of our workforce today. The good news is in 10 years from now, they would be over 60% of our workforce. This may not sound something very deep or impactful at the first sight, but let me explain a little perspective to you. I was talking to my daughter actually, and I was chiding her for not reading the newspaper. When I started learning about the world in the 80s, I would pick up the newspaper every morning at 5:30, carry it to my father, who would finish reading it, and then give back the newspaper to me to read after that. These days, I said, you're not reading any newspaper. So they said, well, we don't read newspaper, but we do consume information. They get, very surprisingly to me, they get information about the world from YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and a lot of other online sources. So it's not that they are disconnected from the world, but they consume information on demand at their convenience, at their place and time of choice. This is very different, which means that here is a generation that's coming up, which is very, very comfortable using a smartphone. So you will notice increasingly every business that is getting launched with an app or a website or whatever it is. An online presence is a must. This number is only going to grow, the number of digital natives. Therefore, any smart initiative that we do under the Smart Nations efforts, right, must take this into consideration. So that was one key point. I probably also want to spend a very brief minute on artificial intelligence. Anyone who has here not heard of artificial intelligence? Okay. Before I say anything, one more disclaimer. Where there is artificial intelligence, there is bound to be artificial stupidity as well. So please keep that in mind when you are doing some designs and planning for some of these things. So for those of you who remember internet, I certainly do. This is about 30 years ago when I first sent a mail to someone in the US, and within 1 minute I had a response from them over an email. This was astounding. And then suddenly within 2 or 3 years, in the mid-90s, there was this dot-com boom that came into place. And in the dot-com boom, there were these internet companies that put an I or an E in front of their names, and then they listed themselves on the stock exchange, made millions of dollars. It was very simple. You need to have a website. You need to have footfalls or eyeballs on the website, and then you needed to have an internet connection. By that yardstick of definition, today, the Roti Prata shop outside on the road is actually an internet company. What I'm trying to tell you by that example is internet, from the way it began, which was a hype, has today come into what I call as a utility. It is just like water and electricity and everything else. It's a utility. Make no mistake, AI is one such utility. AI is not something that you do specifically on the side to enhance the beauty of your organization or the product or the offering or whatever it is. AI is a mindset. Why do I say that? Let's take as an example, if I have an employee in the organization, can I expect that person to come in at 9, be working like a robot till about 4 o'clock and suddenly become very intelligent, and after having his 4:30 coffee, become very intelligent for the next 1.5 hours before going home? It's not possible, right? The current AI solutions that all industries are approaching are like this. If I can relate that to my business, we offer a software that manages a hospital operations end to end. What I would then expect is every user gets an insight from the data that the system has. I should not be saying, you're a hospital, use my dumb HIS, but for these 2 chest X-ray application and maybe fall risk detection, here is an AI solution. That would be exactly what I said, which is, I'm dumb for 8 hours a day and the last 1 hour I'm doing something different. Whereas intelligence must be pervasive, which means every use case that you're talking of in a smart city or a smart nation or anything that you do, think of having AI infused at the design stage, not as an afterthought. AI is not an afterthought. AI is something that you must do at the point of architecture itself. Otherwise, by the time you built it, you'll have to go back and rework it. That's the nature of the beast. And IT companies are very happy because it gives us more revenue, right? You build something, then you say, oh, no, let's tear this down and rebuild it. So, oh, great. I have worked for another 20 people for another 2 years, so problem solved. So think of AI, but think of it very differently. That's my only suggestion. Talking of smart cities, I come from one. Singapore was voted as the #1 smart city in a study done by IMD of Switzerland and SUTD of Singapore. So there's the disclaimer once again. But the smart city, some of the successes of smart city in Singapore is, if I may focus on health, I can also focus on mobility and on administrative services. Very quickly, health, we're talking of cluster of healthcare cities. Novena Healthcare City is one such initiative. So you will have a tertiary, you will have a community health, you will have a nursing home, plus everything else. And we implemented an electronic medical record way back. And so the transportability of a citizen's health records is seamless across this cluster. And this will be replicated in other places. So when you talk of health city or smart health, you have to bring all the components and be totally oblivious, meaning the patient must be totally oblivious to the journey within the health system. They must not feel a dip in the service or the quality of the experience. So I think that's one point I want to talk about. Similarly, in mobility, transportation, land transportation, whether it be train, bus, or taxi, or cycle, or whatever, including the e-bikes that became very famous in Singapore, these are all integrated so that you could seamlessly move from one mobility to the other. So that was on the smart city. The last one I do want to share with you is a real life experience that I have. We rolled out this smart initiative in the eastern suburb called Chai Chee in near Bedok in Singapore. And we gave smart devices to elderly. Minimum requirement was they must be 65 years old. So we gave them devices that monitored their blood pressure, glucose, and weight, and the other pulse and other vitals. They would take those readings through a Bluetooth. It was connected and sent to an application at a center place where there were nursing assistant, nursing aides, and doctors looking at it. And they monitored their health over a period of 6 months. And when we finished this study, we found that the blood pressure, and sorry, not blood pressure, the blood glucose and the diastolic BP readings were better. What this tells us is it works. Intelligent IoT devices work and they can deliver a wellness outcome. I want to make a pitch for moving from treating sick people to maintaining wellness. Healthcare must be about maintaining healthcare and not treating sick people. If you can altogether avoid people from coming into the health system, it's much better than giving them a good treatment after they come in. So that must be the goal of smart health. The exercise that we just did, at the end when we ran a survey, 95% of them were very happy. 91% of them did not need any help with the technology. So this goes against our wisdom that elderly people are resistant to change in technology, change management and technology. It is not true at all. And lastly, 77% of them said they would refer, but 100% of them said they would refer to anyone who was given it for free. So that tells you all about the Singapore people. We want everything for free. With that, I rest my case. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Karthik, it's not only Singapore wants free, everyone wants free over here. But if you look at what Karthik had mentioned, that Singapore is #1 smart city in the world, I think one of the main reasons is because geographical area. When you are as big as Singapore and the city also as big as Singapore, then for us, we feel that it's much easier to implement smart cities. So come to our next panelist that actually come from New Zealand, Mark Thomas. Mark, I'm sure you have been experiencing also the same thing in smart cities in Auckland, for example, right? And we have seen like in New Zealand, you have about 5 million people, and you have about 700 islands around there. Accessing to infrastructure might be a big challenge over there. And I think the thing that I would like to hear is how New Zealand implements smart cities in that kind of challenging terrain and all that. So maybe you would like to highlight something about that. Thanks. Over to you, Mark.
Yes, indeed. Look, greetings, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Mazlan. Thanks for having me at your event. And I'm sure you've been having terrific conversations over the last days. The comments from the earlier panelists takes me back to the times when I was last in a cold hotel in KL, and that was a couple of years ago, pre-pandemic, but I remember those cold hotels in KL well. Look, it's good to be with you, and And the short answer to your question, Dr. Mazlan, is that we've focused on the core problems we're trying to solve with technology, because, you know, there's lots of debate about what smart cities is. What I think we try to do in our largest cities, that's Auckland, Christchurch, of course, which had the earthquake, and our capital, Wellington, is think, what are the most acute problems we have? And typically they're transport or housing. And how can technology play a role in improving the experience for those involved in those industries? So that's the short answer. But I suppose I want to take a broader perspective. I have a couple of different hats, as we all do. I lead the technology business Serviceworks, which works principally on urban mobility platforms. But I'm also on one of the boards of New Zealand Tech, which is our largest tech organisation, looking at sustainability and climate change. And so this is a particular initiative, of course, to make sure that companies are incorporating digital practices into their climate change and sustainability planning. I also chair the ASEAN New Zealand Business Council, because our business was based in Singapore for several years, and we still have a footprint there, although none of us have been there physically, of course, in recent times. So I have those perspectives, I suppose, to bring. And I suppose I'm coming at this from a little bit of a different perspective to say that the other focus we have in New Zealand, I suppose, is how we're using digital practices to achieve sustainability. And you know, the mission we've got for this panel, right, is to give advice to how governments should be modernizing and securing scalable digital futures, how to help governments become smarter. But the mission, of course, is to deliver the future of sustainability. And I think sometimes we get too preoccupied with the particular RFP we're responding to, the particular project, I suppose. And that's all well and good and well for those of us in business. We're using our capability to try to help whoever the client is. But what governments, planning authorities, states, large cities have to do is be more strategic, I suppose, and be more clear that what we mean in 2022 by sustainability is your digital initiative going to help your country get closer to its commitments under the Paris Agreement and the national contribution targets that you will have set. Sustainability has been in our vernacular for decades, right? But what we have to be clearer on is that this is not about doing a better job with recycling. It's of course important to note that actually most countries of the world are rubbish, pardon the pun, at recycling. So we've kind of failed on that task. And what we now need to do to make sure is that what sustainability really means is it going to get us closer to reducing carbon emissions? Because that's what all of our governments are saying before the United Nations we're setting ourselves up to do. And that starts from governments, of course, having a very clear understanding of what their particular challenges are at a country level. And we know just after Paris, there was work done in ASEAN to say that there was between 11 and 24% gap, right, in terms of ASEAN's likelihood of achieving those 2050 zero targets. And what we know recently, last year, you may know the ASEAN State of Climate Change report came out. And that confirmed, of course, that ASEAN countries are not yet on track for that. Not enough have taken, for example, Malaysia's experience of declaring that they will be climate neutral by 2050. But also what we know from that report last year is the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework, which of course was put together to respond to COVID, doesn't have a strong enough focus on green recovery. So digital transformation is there in name, sustainability is there in name, but they need to be more connected to, more hardwired into green recovery measures. And I suppose what we do in New Zealand, if we're looking at a digital problem to be solved through transport or housing, is we try to connect very tightly into how many cars are we going to get off the road, how much more efficient is our waste system going to become, what better utilization of water are we going to be able to come. So whatever the industry is that we're digitalizing, we're trying to be clearer about what the outputs are. And usefully, the World Economic Forum came out with a report last month, partnered with Accenture, which said using digital tools will achieve 20% of our emissions reduction targets. So we've kind of got a clear reference point that could be built into business cases, because we understand that, particularly if we're going to governments with a solution, we've got to have a credible business case. And this is quite a significant study that the World Economic Forum has done that says, at least 20%, of course, that's an average. In some countries, it will be even more, of your country emissions targets can be achieved through digital. So how does that come into your plan? And we need to be more strategic about that plan. We need to have more technology roadmaps in place designed to get those climate emission reductions achieved. And the UK really set this target 10 years ago when they first enacted their climate legislation. They had a digital roadmap, a technology roadmap, as part of that from the outset. And not enough countries do that. So at a country level, we have to be strategic and have a technology roadmap that says, these are our challenges: housing, transport, buildings, agriculture in the case of my country in New Zealand. What are the technologies near and present that we can see that can get us there? And what are some of the more investments we need to make into research to make more progress over time? So look, those are my opening remarks, I think, to say that you have to tie some hard measures into the particular transport problems you're trying to solve with technology, but critically put pressure and support on governments to link it into a broader strategic roadmap, a technology plan to make sure that sustainability actually means something specific, and that specific is that your country has a greater likelihood of achieving its climate reduction targets. Let me finish there, Dr. Mazlan.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I think most of the cities around the world, one of the main agenda for them is to reduce that carbon emission. And as we know that this is mainly due to congestion, the traffic congestion. And what they have seen is that 30% of the congestion, especially around the cities, because of the people are trying to find the car park. You know, you are trying to go round and round the cities just to find the car park, and that, create a lot of this carbon to the environment. That's one of the things. And a lot of industrial also one of the areas where it increased that carbon emission. So I think this area we will talk more with May also later, because this involves the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goal of United Nations. One of the areas which I would like to highlight to our next panelist, because he is from Singapore and he's one of the earlier pioneers in AI, Prof. Nazri. And I'm sure that when we talk about smart cities, when we heard about the term smart, it should be, intelligent enough. So that's where AI should play a role. So either in smart cities, smart industry, whatever application there is. So maybe you'd like to hear a little bit more about this perspective from Prof. Nazri. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mazlan. Thanks, Dr. Mazlan and fellow panelists. So I would like to start off by saying that when it comes to AI adoption or implementation in the context of smart cities, smart nation, and as well as smart industries, we ourselves need to be smart citizens to be able to achieve that goal, whatever goals that have been set. So in our experience in dealing with smart cities, smart nations, smart industries across more than 10 over countries, we have actually a center for AI innovation in KL itself. At the heart of KL, we actually have a headquarters that deals with AI research and implementation, what you call the applied research. So in our dealings with many policymakers, there's one key problem that we see across the nation. So it's not just about the geographical size of any country. Of course, that plays an important part, but it's the adequacy and it's the availability of talents, right? In order to deliver the full scale end-to-end implementation of a smart nation. So I'd like to take a little bit of a reflection about what happened 3 to 4 years ago. So 3 to 4 years ago, my kids in Singapore were put through a 1-week AI coding program. So I was like thinking, wow, there's such a program in Singapore offered by private schools to teach 10-year-olds how to do coding, programming, how to do AI analytics for 5 days. So I see AI programs being developed and conducted in universities, in colleges for many years, but we're talking about secondary schools and primary schools now. So I was thinking, okay, so the world is moving towards tackling the Gen Y, Gen Z, the millennials, right? To be able to design, to develop, right, robotics, to be able to design AI-based analytics at a very young age. So it's a new language to them, but they're able to develop basic solutions with zero experience in terms of working life. They are able to create that solution within 5 days. Of course, daddy has to pay a little bit more to achieve that 5-day results, right? To do that basic apps or that basic, solution, so to speak. And since then, my 2 kids in their early age, right, are able to build more and more solutions with platforms that I've never heard before. And I'm an AI practitioner the last 16, 17 years or so, especially. So the point that I was trying to make was, I learned something from them. I learned something from the millennials. And I learned something from this new generation. In order to create that smart nation, you need to create smart citizens. And the education begins at a very young age. So Singapore has basically opened up, not just for private schools, but even for public schools. Now it has become so pervasive for children in the primary and secondary school to be involved in that. So that inspired me 3 to 4 years ago. Inspired me and said, if kids can be taught from scratch how to do this under 1 week, why can't adults do the same? So at our Center for AI Innovation, we came out with this no-code, low-code platform for experienced people who are good in HR, sustainability, Islamic banking finance, right? Marketing, good in GRC, governance risk compliance. They have tremendous knowledge, tremendous experience, tremendous exposure, right? But they do not know AI and machine learning coding. So what seems to be missing here is the ability to empower the 95% of the workforce in any organization, in any nation, right? To convert 95% of the workforce, of the experts who do not know coding and programming to be AI ready and creating AI solutions. A lot of smart nation, smart city, smart industry strategy is always about how to cater to users, right? So the demand side, which is important, but where there's demand, there must be supply, right? So when you talk about supply, you need to build a pool of tech creators of AI-based solution, right? And this pool of talents come from any country's pool of experts who are non-AI, non-ML experts. You know what I mean? Can you turn a doctor who works in the healthcare sector to become AI ready? Can you turn a teacher who has tremendous experience to guide, empower, and teach students to be using AI to create personalized learning roadmaps? Can you turn an auditor who has to manually audit, whether it's external or internal, you have to audit millions of transactions to come out to identify red flags, to identify anti-money laundering measures, right? To identify all the fraudulent activities or bribery activities based on symptoms, right? So our point is, because there's a huge pool of experts there, but very little AI ML people. How do you address that concern in the context of smart nation, smart industry, and smart city? Is to build the smart citizen by empowering them. So in Malaysia itself, we have more than 56 over experts in their respective fields, but without AI and machine learning knowledge, who have been empowered to build their own AI architecture, design, and actual prototypes. This is a remarkable thing simply because we looked at how kids are being taught these days. You look at how kids are being taught these days, you wonder, can we contextualize it to create smart citizen? Now let me address the second part. When we talk about AI, again, 90%, 9 out of 10 people will confuse between the concept of AI and BI, right? AI stands for artificial intelligence and BI stands for business intelligence. So whenever we see dashboards, whenever we see visuals, whenever we see matrix and numbers, we instantly associate it with AI. And the technology providers, a lot of them will say, oh, this is an AI solution. When it is just analytics, it's just business intelligence. It's a CRM, database solutions, customer relationship management turned into a dashboard, a visual dashboard with nice charts, nice graphs, with nice pie charts and trends, right? Got heat maps and everything like that. Those are not AI, those are BI. So I would like to address the audience by taking a step back, by addressing this fundamental idea of what is AI, what is not. But when that solution begins to give solution, begins to explain, begins to predict, begins to recommend a set of action plan either in words or in voice to solve a complex problem, what you call the cognitive part, right? Then that's AI, right? The ability to do predictive and prescriptive analytics with narrative statements or voice that address a particular complex, not routine, complex solution, then that would be applied AI in practice. Okay, so it's important not to mix AI and BI when we pursue any form of digital transformation strategy, because digital tools are plentiful. Forrester identifies AI as the next world game-changing solution in the next 5 years. McKinsey estimated across 20 over sectors that adoption of AI in that way, in the definition that I just described, could lead to an ROI of between 20 to 120%. And that is through their global survey of practitioners. Now, what is the problem then? Other than human talent, other than the human hardware, right? Hardware, HEART, is the barriers to adopting AI, such as cost, such as timeliness, such as the lack of talents, right? And then means that you need to have hardcore computer engineers, software engineers. So the fate of smart nation, smart city, smart industry cannot be just dependent on one party. The policymakers, i.e. the vendors, the IT technology experts, it has to empower the policymakers, it has to empower the users, it has to empower, right, the frontline people, and across all verticals, industry verticals and focus areas for that to be effective. So what you're trying to do is, you're trying to democratize AI by ensuring that all the stakeholders are not just users, they are creators of AI solution without the need for coding and programming, by converting their expertise, right, and robotizing, for lack of a better phrase, robotizing their knowledge into a set of robo-advisors. When people are empowered, when the citizens are empowered, are being smartened, if that's such a word, right? When they've raised their intelligence with artificial intelligence, it becomes augmented intelligence. Augmented intelligence is something that every country needs to pursue smart nation, to achieve results from industries. Okay, so through the example that I had observed, sending my kids, and so do millions of people, millions of kids who went through all these activities from various parts of the world, it just dawned on me that the future is both opportunistic and challenging. Challenging for who? Challenging for people who do not upgrade themselves as smart citizens to deal with smart nations. Opportunistic for who? Opportunistic for the younger generation who are exposed to all these AI and ML matters at a very young age. China started that in early days, right, in the primary school, and Singapore started to follow suit. So we feel that the curriculum of AI, and I'm not talking about theoretical AI, I'm talking about applied AI, needs to be present, not just in universities. It has to start earlier than that, for Malaysia to gather a pool of experts on the younger generation side and convert the experience of the older generation to create AI solutions without the need for coding and programming. So I recap: younger generation, start early; older generation, convert their expertise onto a no-code, low-code platform, right, to create their expertise into a set of robo-advisors and can impact industries. So with that, thank you very much.
Thanks, Prof. Nazri. I like the point that you mentioned about AI to be, embraced in all the areas, especially when it involves human people. It will augment the intelligence of the people, augment the intelligence of the community themselves, the citizens themselves. So when we talk about smart citizens, when we talk about smart cities, it's always centered within that citizen-centric. And of course, one of the areas we also like to wish to have is also the government themselves to be more intelligent in making decisions too. So with that, I would like to, for the next panelist, he's from China, Dr. Wanda, and looking at his, if I'm not mistaken, he's based in Shenzhen. So this city is very much industrial based. And we'd like to hear more about him, Dr. Gawanda's view and perspective and his ideas of how the government actually promote the smart industry in that sector. Over to you, Dr. Go.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Mazlan Abbas. As an economist from China think tank, I would like to start 3 stories with my view about the smart industry, what role for the government. And the first story about the Shenzhen, from Shenzhen, about Tencent. As you know, Tencent is a famous internet company. We all use WeChat, just from Tencent. And also Tencent have the financial payment, gaming and entertainment products. But a lot of people don't know Tencent invest in digital agriculture. And also, for example, they use the big data and AI to invest in the goods and checking farmings and also the other things, a lot of agricultural products. So this means the Tencent not only just invest in the WeChat and entertainment, but also the traditional industries such as agriculture. The second story comes from Guangzhou, China. CN is a famous cross-border e-commerce company, as you know, and they specialize in the fast fashion women's clothing made in the market in European and also in US markets. Its business includes commodity design, warehouse, and also supply chain, internet, R&D, and online operations. Now it is a unicorn and also valued at $100 billion. So CN just based on Guangzhou and on Bay Area, but of course connected thousands factories with the women's clothes and also very traditional industries. The third story comes from Xi'an, China. The company is called UMA Intelligent Company. It trades welding robots with AI, and also the company provides solutions to welder shortage. As you know, the young generation, they don't like to do the work of welder. So what can we do? So the robots to replace the workers is a good choice for the company. So of course, the welding is a key part of the traditional manufacturing industries and also connected with the building of bridges, ships, cars, and houses. The market is very huge. So what can we learn from the 3 stories? All 3 companies, they are related with the intelligence, big data, and also internet-based operations. So smart industries is very important for us. And also, it not only to be used in the online services, but also a lot of traditional services, traditional manufacturing, traditional industries, such as I mentioned about the 3 stories, such as the agriculture, such as the clothing, such as the welding industry. All the traditional industries are transformed from a very traditional to a digital economy to a smart industry. So what can we do for the government, how the government to promote the smart industry? I would like to take Shenzhen as an example, because Shenzhen is a special economic zone in China, and also Shenzhen is a pioneer city in smart industries. So what does Shenzhen municipal government's policies, what do they focus on? How about the effects? First, I would like to say the policies from Shenzhen municipal government to support new generation information infrastructure, just as the other experts talking about that, about the 5G based stations, about the IoT sensing networks, about the computing facilities, and about the cloud platforms, all the infrastructures, information infrastructures to be provided, or in most of them invested by the government. Secondly, it's very important about the policy is to support the smart industrial clusters. Yeah, of course, the industrial cluster is very important for the smart industries, such as Shenzhen municipal government has just announced 20 strategic emerging industry clusters, and also most of them focus on smart industry. And also among all the clusters, 15 square kilometer park is planned for each cluster. So the space is very important for the cluster, and also the land use, the space, and also urban planning is very important to support the smart industry. Thirdly, about the financial policy, because of all the smart industries should be supported by the finance, and also for the equity investment, venture capital, and also, of course, the stock market is very important for the local government. As you know, in Shenzhen, GME of the Shenzhen Stock Exchange is a very important supporter for the smart industries. Of course, the legislation is also very important to support the data property rights and personal data privacy, and also data transactions, and also the data market, I think, just come from the law system, and also the government have to do a lot of jobs. And also, finally, the very important about the digital government, because a lot of data comes from the government, and also the opening, the transparency from the government is very important to support the smart industry. So Shenzhen is just a city, as you know, in China, the central government, and also we pay a lot of attention, and also the policy to support the smart market. Just last week, the central government published the guiding opinions on strengthening the construction of digital government in China. And also a lot of policies just released by the central government, and also it says very ambitious about national goals. So what is the challenges facing the smart industry? Of course, I think a lot of challenges. For example, the technology should be developed more disruptive innovation is needed for the big data, blockchain, and also cloud computing. A lot of technologies should be developed by the companies. A lot of R&D should be input. And also, second question about, I think, about the cost. How about for example, the replacement for the robot to replace the human beings, about the workers? How about their jobs? And also, who will pay for all these transformation? I think is very important, and also is a big challenge for the companies. Of course, there are other problems, such as I mentioned about the legal system, about the ethics, about there are a lot of things about that. So that's my views. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Wanda. I think one of the very interesting part is that when we see the emergence of new technologies like AI, drones and all that, this requires the intervention of the government, especially the policies. Policies need to be revived, refreshed, because these are different way of doing things. You see drones where they can fly, what they can do, what they can carry, the no-fly zone and all that, robotics, AI, how it involves people and all that. So that requires new policies, and it's a good example what China have done in Shenzhen. So the government themselves look into the new policies, new guidelines for the industry to prosper. So for the next round of questions, maybe it's about 2 or 3 minutes for one panelist, 2 or 3 minutes. These questions I would like to ask to you. May, I think we have seen you are in the areas of smart cities, around the region and all that. We have seen different countries, different way of adoption of smart cities. Some of them can be a very good example, but some of them, they might copy a certain cities, but it doesn't work. So maybe you like to highlight what are the main challenges and how actually we can resolve this kind of challenges.
Very good question. Did everybody get that? Okay, very good question. Why are we in smart cities? What do we mean by smart cities? Cities occupy only 2% of our land globally. Do you know that? But cities emit 60% of our carbon globally. So like what Mark mentioned earlier, yes, we do need to take climate change into consideration. Why? Because all of us live in cities. Malaysia, 75% of us live in cities. We are way above the 60% mark that UN has stipulated up to 2030. So cities, number one, is very important. And how do cities and us, communities, transform? Very simply, 5 key areas. Number one, we are talking about stakeholder collaboration. Stakeholder collaboration means government, agencies, private organizations, businesses, academic institutions, because they provide us the R&D, and our civil organizations. So the key stakeholders need to get together to come on a certain purpose and a certain intent to do better for that city and for that region. One good example is actually Kawayan City in the Philippines. This is northeast Philippines, and this area gets hit by typhoon 7 to 9 times a year. And their flood is about 60 to 65%. So totally, they have to rebuild. So what do they do every year? Do they build back every year, same? Or do they use innovative technologies to build back better? So in the Philippines, we did a multi-stakeholder collaboration. We actually signed MOU with 8 government agencies. It's the first country that I've done something like this, that we are still trying to do in this part of the world. This part of the world means Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam. Yeah, but in Philippines, we have done that. We have signed, and all 8 government agencies from Department of Labor, Economic Zone, Higher Education, ICT, Science and Technology, all of us agree that we need to move towards a certain objective, and with this objective, these are the KPIs, and the things that we need to start first, like what Prof mentioned earlier, Prof Nazri, education is very important. So besides stakeholder collaboration, education and awareness is programs that we're going to start with all the agencies first, and then with all the city officials, and then with all the communities on the ground. So with the communities on the ground, we work with the civil organizations and the students to actually create the awareness and to basically teach the citizens and the residents where we are going to go and what we're going to achieve. So it's actually a collective effort. The third one is actually looking at disruptive, I call it disruptive or innovative technologies. And one of them is what I mentioned earlier, a digital twin of the city. What does digital twin mean? It is a representation, a digital representation of the city itself, which means you can use it for, like metaverse, you can use it for gaming, and then you can layer information and data, and you can run AI simulations on it. So number third is actually technology. Technology is very important, and it has to be sustainable technologies. We are not talking about technologies where we use like huge amounts of energy that is going to then counter the effect of carbon. The fourth one is what Dr. Goh mentioned actually. The fourth one is actually sustainable ecosystem. So we are talking about food. He spoke about the first example, food and food security. He spoke about the second one, which is Shine. I don't know whether you guys caught that. It's SHEIN. They are now a $100 billion company and they sell women's clothing. How are they so successful? They have a sustainable ecosystem within their organization. So within your organization, you don't just look at my organization, but you also need to look at your own supply chain surrounding your organization and how to make all of you sustainable. So that's the fourth key point. And the last key point, which is very important, is the data and the shared data or the open data. So government agencies need to have information that can be shared with the private sectors, with the academic institutions, so that we can all make better decisions. With this information, Prof. Nazri, I think we can have many AI simulations and new innovation and AI use cases will come up. But without this data as the base and without the base technology, we cannot get there.
Okay, thanks, May. So there's a lot of points there. I think one of the things that we like, yeah, should be within 2 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes. So I would like to shorten it before I prolong it longer. But anyway, I'd like to pass to Karthik. Maybe he have some few points that he would like to highlight, especially because I have that question again to him, because in different countries, the maturity level of the awareness of using tech is different. You know, we have more than over 20 countries that listening to our event. Maybe Singapore is slightly different, you know, Philippines different and all that. Especially when you mention about elderly people adopting new tech and all that, 65 years old people more. But I have seen a lot of senior people are not able to use high tech. So that's one thing. Do you think that, you know, what are the things that you can help them? Or do you feel that AI is one of the things in the healthcare to help of this shortage of, you know, usage of adoption of new tech? Maybe.
So when I was talking of the elderly people in that pilot that we did something very interesting. The first 1 week was completely in-person meetings. So which means we sent people to their homes to say, hey, this is how you install these devices and this is how you use the app on your smartphone. Almost all of them have a smartphone. So we just told them this is what it is. If there are any questions, please do get back to us. So I think that initial person-to-person interaction is important for us to remove the fear of technology. And I think that is what we needed to do. And those sessions with each elderly was less than 15, 20 minutes. It doesn't take a lot of time. So, but you know, you have to explain to them this is what it is. You can't send them a PDF or a WhatsApp message and say, okay, read it on your own. It's an online manual. Let me know if you have any questions. Here is the contact number of the call center. It doesn't work like that. So I think once you allay the fears of them from a change management perspective, then things become a lot smoother. And I think that's what I would like to say. But other than that, I have been to a lot of countries where I've seen the elderly with the similar solution, including in Australia. Almost everyone has a smartphone. The question is, how do you make use of the smartphone? How do you leverage their familiarity with technologies like WhatsApp or some of the others, and then drive it forward a little bit more? So we have to learn to work with the technologies that they are currently comfortable with, rather than trying to give them a new app or do something new. And I think that would be the key difference between something that becomes a successful initiative and something that's not successful.
Okay. Thank you, Karthik. Now I would like to move to Mark. This is something a little bit personal because to you, Mark, because you have been working in the Auckland Council, right, for the last 6 years. Now you're an entrepreneur. So I would like to hear a little bit more about the secret, building smart cities, understanding how the mind of smart city councils work. Sometimes it's very difficult to deploy because of certain issues and all that. And now you're an entrepreneur, you're outside the councils, and I'm sure you have that secret success that maybe you would like to share of how to expedite that implementation of smart cities.
Thank you. It's a tricky topic. Look, I greatly enjoyed the 6 years I spent as an elected member of part of Auckland Council, but frankly, I can tell you that one of the reasons for leaving was because I thought I could make more impact, actually, as a technology entrepreneur, because we all know how challenging it is, right, to make progress with councils. That just reinforces, I think, the need for entrepreneurs, for also NGOs, all sorts of institutions that have technical capability to really put positive pressure on councils and governments to make more progress. Councils are inherently risk averse, governments are inherently risk averse, and so the tension, of course, is that there's a lot about digital that is risk taking or risk seeking, not in all areas. And of course, there's a degree of risk that's more or less acceptable. Health, of course, the degrees of risk, are really very low. In other areas, you can afford to be a little bit more assertive. And so I think the source really is to kind of ideally construct a governance group, if you're setting up a big project, that actually has the right mix of private sector people and the government control regulators. Because you're not going to be able to make adequate enough progress. And of course, the rate of change is so great that if we're not making quick enough progress, then actually what's going to happen is there'll be a different aspect to the technology that we might be able to evolve to, or the problem might change. I thought that May did a great job of outlining an architecture of kind of solutions that need to kind of go into the plan. I read that the Ministry of Science and Technology in Malaysia has, I think, 17 technology roadmaps planned. That's almost too many, because we to be able to make progress, we have to focus on the things that matter most, right? Those 17 roadmaps are terrific in terms of building capability and blockchain, AI deployment, IoT, and its utilization. But I come back to my first point, that's got to be against a strategic kind of goal, which I'm arguing should be achieving climate change. And then making sure, of course, you've got the right mix of personnel and capabilities. And that's, I think, where councils and governments often fail. They want to retain too much control. And my message is you're just not going to be able to make enough progress. And this isn't a pitch for kind of giving money to more private sector. Just at the leadership level, the project scoping level and governance, you've got to have a diverse array of people if you are really serious about making progress with smart nations and developing smarter industries.
Okay, thanks, Mark. So to the next, our panelist is that Prof. Your area and my area, I'm in the area of IoT, and I've been in IoT since early 2000, just like you in the AI in the early 2000, right? And for me, when I look at IoT, the growth of IoT doesn't have that exponential growth yet. Still slowly going up. I'm not sure about AI. Maybe you would like to share with us, your experience for the last 20 years in the AI, and how the adoption rate going to be, and where exactly you are now. Are you satisfied with the current progress?
AI 15, 20 years ago, it's like you're a surfer on a surfing board on the ocean with your six-pack on your tummy, with a well-polished and well-waxed surfboard, but there's no wave, right? There's no wave to guide you through. Then people are more concerned about dealing with the replacement or displacement of jobs. They are skeptical of AI. They are very fearful of AI. They still do, but smaller minority now. So 10, 15 years ago, they'll be very skeptical, very apprehensive, very fearful, and very negative, right? So how we survive and how we thrive is we communicate not the technology. We communicate the technology is a means to an end. We communicate the impact or the outcome. So things that take 6 months can be done under 1 month. Things that take 3 weeks can be done under 1 hour. Things that require 20 men people, we take away 80% of the task, but redeploy the 20 packs with upskill and reskilling strategies. So we upgrade and uplift them with higher value adding job and higher paying job, and with higher rewards rather than the monotonous. So they have more break, less stress, and yet taking on more strategic responsibility. Then COVID happens, right? So when COVID kicks in, AI wasn't a priority, okay? Of course, IoT, of course, the e-commerce, of course, the purchases, logistics, online payment platform will be thriving, right? The Zoom, the communication platform. But AI was the least priority, right? People are more concerned about feeding and taking care of their rice bowl. AI is like vitamins. It's not a painkiller, right? It's a vitamin. Then, after COVID starts to subside, right? So for 2-3 years, we do a lot of advocacy, we do a lot of R&D, we do a lot of education, we do a lot of certification to raise the awareness of people, especially in the region, in the ASEAN region, right? So after COVID ends, so the last 2 years or so, people start to change their mindset about AI, right? They start to feel that, hey, after I got COVID, after I work from home, I need things to be faster, quicker, cheaper, and more accurate. So I need less accident, less risk, faster, quicker, and yet lower cost. So people are more able to, become more objective about the benefits of AI once they are educated. So AI went through many phases. The first phase was about not showing the technology, but showing mainly 99.99% you have to show the outcome or the benefits of AI, right? And then slightly before COVID, people are fascinated with all the hype, right? People are fascinated when blockchain came in. There's a portion of AI in blockchain. People get curious. People get curious about the technology, just curious. COVID come in, AI became less priority. COVID subsides, AI becomes a strategic part of their digital transformation. So they begin to realize, once they understand what is AI, what is not, once they understand how AI can be put onto a layer of their existing platform, once AI is understood to be not taking too much energy or data warehouse, they can operate out of cloud, right? Once they know that AI can be done without having data scientists, without having years of implementation, once they are educated with that, they are becoming more receptive and starts to implement it within their organization in baby steps. Yeah. So I think this is my short, response to you. Thank you, Dr. Mazlan, for that good question.
Going back to our panelist, Dr. Goh, we know that China is one of the first country to encounter COVID and how the country react. So what is your opinion in terms of, if there is any new cases of COVID or different COVID-20 or whatever, how the government now is going to prepare themselves if there is another such pandemic? Do you see there is another new transition of using new technology or new promotion of guideline or whatever?
Yes, in terms of the smart nation, smart cities, I just want to add one point about that. You mentioned about the government policies. Yes, of course, the government should more cooperate with the private companies, NGOs, and also think tanks. So they should be more open, more transparency, and also they should just talk a lot, and also some more perennial solutions about, I mentioned about the challenges for the law system, and also ethics issues, and also the replacements of the robots for the workers. A lot of things they just should sit together to work out what we can do, and what can be training the workers for the new economy, or how to deal with these the programs. So I think it's very important for the governments more cooperative with the other organizations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think I would like also to open one question from the floor if there is any. If there's none, I would like to have one rapid question to all of the panelists with one simple answer. Okay? So a one sentence answer. Okay. The question is something like this. What is the recipe of success of smart city or smart nation or even the smart industry, in your opinion, what is the recipe? So that recipe can be a multi-million-dollar recipe. May? Yeah.
Ladies first. My one key point is the multi-stakeholder collaboration for a sustainable ecosystem.
Okay, thank you. Karthik?
A good technology architectural plan from the beginning.
All right. Okay. Mark?
You need a leader. There's got to be one leader, one champion who can drive this.
Yeah. Okay, good. Good point. From Nazri?
3 T's, TTT, technologies, talents, and timeliness.
All right. Dr. Go?
Yes, smart industries need a smart government.
Okay. Everyone agreed with that. In fact, everyone agreed with all the panelists here. So what I would like to say is that for this topic, we have heard a lot about, how we move from smart cities to a bigger smart nation agenda, and then we look how we transform the industry with new tech, the talents that we need to build. So with this, I think a lot of points that you can take away. But finally, I would like to also get all the audience to thanks to all our panelists here for very excellent thoughts and views. Thank you very much to all of you. Thanks.